So back in 2016, Rogue One came out, and we got to see some familiar faces from the original trilogy, but we don't really get to see much of everyone else like how we used to see them all working together in the first film. So how cool would it be if we used visual effects to bring some of those forgotten characters back together again since the last time we saw them in 1977? The idea here is that I want to expand on all of the same methods they used and apply that to remaking some of the scenes in this movie, in Rogue One. So how am I going to do this? On the Industrial Light and Magic YouTube channel, they actually reveal how they brought back the first ever Red Leader for Rogue One. Instead of using some groundbreaking CGI to recreate an actor from a different point in time, all they did was get some deleted footage from the first Star Wars film, rotoscope the actor out, and replace the background to fit the new look of the movie. And that's all they did, which is pretty straightforward with all things considered. Some other things to pay attention to: the shots in Rogue One have a much brighter variety of detail, while also getting to see more in frame from any camera position, rather than just the isolated repetition of close-up shots with the high contrast shadows we get to see in New Hope. So not only do I have to capture that same energy from the new movies, the real challenge is trying to make this look better than the original. So first thing I did was, I found an X-Wing model on Sketchfab that I really liked, that had some really good detail put into it from the inside. I went ahead and downloaded that and then brought it into Maya, and what's also great about this is, when I extract the file, it actually provides all the texture maps I need to make this work. All I have to do is assign a basic material to each part of the model, link those textures into all the right attribute channels, and then voila, I'm done. I don't have to spend any extra time making the textures myself, it's all done for me. Thanks Sketchfab! So right now I'm working on the shot of an X-Wing in hyperspace, and we don't really get to see who's in it. And I thought this would be a really cool way to introduce this guy called Wedge into the scene. I took a shot from episode 4 where he's just in the cockpit and I rotoscoped him out of the footage. I made a camera and positioned it in the X-Wing model to try and match the perspective of where he would be at. Now let's go ahead and make a playblast out of that. A playblast is a quick preview of any 3D animation that gives the idea of what the final render would look like, without having to render anything with specific detail. And now I have a better visual understanding of what this shot will look like before I start rendering anything out. After that, I rendered this whole thing out in separate layers using the Arnold renderer in Maya. What I really like about the compositing is, with the rendered layers, you don't always have to look the exact same way as you made them at first. I can always adjust and scale it to a point where I have that extra option to emphasize more subtle details than the slightest. One for the cockpit and one for the engines. I want to have more control over the brightness of the lighting and how much lens exposure I want for each part of the X-Wing. I did this by making each layer out of focus with just certain values so that it made sense with how it looked compared to the foreground plate. But I just noticed that I have a problem. The 3D model I have doesn't match up with the background details that you see in the newer movies and TV shows. There's all this extra complex mechanical stuff going on back there. So I tried actually looking for another model that had some of those same details put into it, but I couldn't really find one that I liked. So here's my next plan. I went on Google and looked for some images that closely resembled the interior design from the Rogue Squadron video game, and then just took a few of those images to put them together to fit the correct look of it all. Sometimes when CGI isn't enough, VFX can come into play very easily. That's why we say we'll fix it in post. For the hyperspace background, I found this short clip online and used that to composite into the background for this shot. I added some blue color correction and then put a wiggle effect onto the effects timeline to match that same random turbulence and texture feeling you get from the hyperspace look. For just the regular lighting, I tried matching the shots from the movie the best way I could using some related scenes with similar lighting scenarios in Rogue One. First, I used a directional light to act as a sun, so when I started animating the X-Wing going forward, that same light source will start pivoting around the empty space, causing those lights and shadows to move around on the surface. Adding these extra elements can really help this go a long way. It doesn't really have to be consistent with each direction, but I do want to show some kind of animated lighting scenario so that the surface material doesn't look like it's just floating in one spot. Otherwise, the scene is just going to look dead and boring. I then made a sky dome for the overall environmental exposure. This is going to spill into those super dark areas to really fill in the gaps that we lost with just that directional light alone. And just looking at it now, this really doesn't look that bad for a first try. In the compositing process, I really wanted to spice this thing up even more. I don't really have a ton of assets to recreate the space battle all around the rendered layers, so I'm just going to use some footage from the actual movie as the background plate, and then I'm just going to add some lens blur to really make this out of focus. Now it's just a subtle and secondary action that fills up that empty space in the back perfectly. After that, I added a vignette effect to really center the focus on the characters as the main focal points of the shot. Then I added a lens flare effect to some of the shots as well. Of course though, depending on if the shot was moving a certain way, I would have to animate that lens flare in specific directions to respond to where the direction of the sun is coming from and on how I thought the scene was moving. All of this stuff can also be considered as a film technique called dirtying up the frame, which basically means just surrounding stuff around the camera in the foreground or just blurring out things in the background. After that, I finished it off with some lens distortion to somewhat make it feel like all this is being caught on a real take. Alright, I know it's been a while. I am beyond excited to finally show this to all of you. I hope you like it.
Keep your eyes open for those fighters.
Right with you, boss.
I'm right with you, Red 3.
This is Admiral Reddish of the Rebel Alliance. All squadron leaders report in.
This is Gold Leader. We're starting our attack run.
Watch it, you've got one on your tail.
3-5. I see them.
More fighters, form up, 6-5.
Hold tight.
Alright everyone, that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Maybe consider watching some of my other videos listed on here, and see you in the next one.